Welcome to the channel. Today, we're exploring some unbelievable story. Stay tuned and let's dive in. I suppose any guy who has ever been happily married, even for a short period, believes he has the finest wife ever. I can honestly say that, because I was happily married to Sophia for 48 years, and she was really the finest wife a guy could possibly wish. I say was since she is no longer alive. She was diagnosed with a rare non-Hodgkin lymphoma less than a year ago, the latest in a long string of medical problems that have afflicted her throughout her life. The physicians discovered pockets of infection throughout her belly, mostly around her big intestine, and advised her that surgery would be required to complete the remainder of her chemotherapy. It would be dangerous, but if all went well, the doctor indicated she'd be able to continue her chemotherapy and recover from the disease. But things did not go as planned. The illness had progressed farther than they had anticipated, and doctors needed to do more than just remove portion of her big intestine. They tried all they could, but she did not survive the surgery. I was saddened when they told me the news, but we both knew she may not make it. We also knew she wouldn't survive without surgery, so we decided to give it a go. I had just gotten home from her burial, which was a sad occasion but heavily attended since everyone who knew her loved her greatly. I sat in my chair and took out our picture book, reflecting on the life we lived. It may seem unusual, but I met Sophia before meeting my first wife, Linda. It was 1966, and I had just been posted to my unit at Marine Corps Base Fort Bragg in Southern California. My MOS, occupational specialization, was 0311 Infantry. One of the men in my unit set me up on a blind date, so I went. After all, that was much superior than sitting on base. My friend Paul had first hooked me up with Sophia's acquaintance, Pat. It turned out, however, that Paul and Pat got along well, so he ended up. Her long blonde hair and beautiful features drew me in right away. She had the largest blue eyes I'd ever seen, and a grin could launch a fleet of ships. I'd always been a leg guy. Her legs, oh my god, those legs were, as the youth nowadays could say, to die for. To say I was smitten is an understatement of the year. We spent the evening getting to know one another and realized we had a lot in common. We both served in the military, but she was in the Navy and worked as a corpsman at the Naval Hospital in Balboa, the Navy's equivalent of a doctor. We both liked the same music and movies and had many other interests. Before the night ended, I knew I was going to marry this lady. We dated for a few months before steadily drifting apart. She told me she was concerned that we were becoming too close, so we stopped seeing one another on a regular basis. I was upset at first, but then I met Linda, who would become my first wife. Was it ever a mistake? Linda was initially lovely, sweet, and enjoyable to be around, but it seems that the instant we married, the mask fell off, and I awoke next to the shrew from hell. We hadn't even been married a year when I discovered her in bed with a man from high school. My unit was in the field for training, and we were supposed to be gone for a week, but we finished a day early. I was looking forward to going home and surprising Linda, but I was the one who was astonished. I could hear them from the moment I went into the modest apartment we shared off base. I walked into the bedroom to see a scrawny, long-haired, scraggly-looking worm between her legs, hammering for all he was worth. I was enraged and kicked him all over the flat before throwing him out the door. Linda shivered beneath the covers as I returned to the bedroom for her. "Please, Ryan, don't hit me," she implored. I shake my head. I was taught not to beat a woman, and I wasn't going to do it now, even if I felt like throwing my fist through her betraying face. I took down a couple of luggage and put them on the bed. "Get out. Just pack your stuff and get the hell out now." She gathered her belongings as I got a drink and waited. She finished and came out into the living room, where I sat. "I'm sorry," she said. I never said anything but pointed to the door. She phoned her parents and they arrived to fetch her up. Her father was also a Marine, and I informed him what I was getting into. He shakes his head. "I'm sorry, Ryan. I thought we raised her better than that." They hauled her away, and I never saw her again. Fortunately, the next day, I filed for divorce. I was startled when she agreed to my requirements, and our marriage became just another statistic. My unit was shipped to Vietnam just in time for the Tet Offensive in February 1971, a few months after I filed for divorce. I wish I could claim I fought them all back with a pig's jawbone, but I can't. To be honest, I was the one who received a beating. An enemy bullet ripped through my upper left leg and another struck me in the belly. They saved my leg, but they told me I'd have to go to physical therapy for a while. I also had to go through many procedures to repair the damage to my stomach. I was eventually transported to the United States and treated at Balboa Naval Hospital. The day I arrived, I awoke to see Sophia standing over me. At first, I believed I had died and gone to heaven. I will never forget her first words to me. "What are you doing in my hospital, Ryan Hammond?" She said with a grin. "Is this a ploy to get me to go out with you or something?" "Can't blame a guy for trying," you said. I saw she had 2 chevrons on her white uniform, indicating she was a petty officer 2nd class. "I see you made 2nd class," I told you. She nodded her head. "Yep, and if I'm not mistaken, that means I outrank you, Corporal." I waved a hand. "For now," I replied. I realized she didn't wear a wedding ring, and a part of me was relieved. "Are things with you? Have you met someone yet?" I requested an answer. She shakes her head. "Nope, I guess you kind of ruined me for anyone else," she answered, smiling. "Now, Corporal, you need to get your rest. I hear they are going to start your physical therapy before too long. Will I see you again?" I was wondering. She said with a mischievous grin, "You'd better believe it, Marine. I'm going to be watching you like a hawk." I couldn't help but smile broadly. That was the finest news I'd heard in a long time. She glanced around for a minute before delicately kissing my cheek. "Take care of yourself. I'll check on you later." She kept her promise and arrived at the time my food was delivered to my room. She stated her shift had just finished and she wanted to see me before leaving for home. We sat and spoke as we both ate the supper on my tray. When she inquired, I told her about my failed marriage with Linda. She listened quietly, then grabbed my head in her hands. She was a fool and an idiot. You deserve much better than that. We spoke until she was notified that visiting hours were ended. I stopped her before she could leave the room. "You know, I thought about you an awful lot over there in Nam," I told you. She gazed at me for a brief time, her expression filled with anguish. "I've thought about you almost non-stop since our last date," she told me. "Maybe if I hadn't pushed you away," she started, before her eyes welled up with tears. Wiping her tears, she dashed out of the room. "What was that all about?" I inquired. Surely she did not blame herself for my injuries. I saw her a lot during the following 6 months. She stopped by my room at least twice a day to check on me, even while she was off duty. Many times, she would carry me outside in a wheelchair so I could smoke. We spoke for hours about one topic or another. She would wear shorts when she wasn't on duty since she knew I liked staring at her legs. As time passed, I realized I was in love with her, there was no denying it. I knew she felt the same way, but something was holding her back. I decided to bring up the topic one day when we were outdoors. I told her how I felt. She spoke with tears in her eyes. "Oh, Ryan, I love you too." "Then let's get married," I responded. She glanced down for a bit before speaking. "But you don't understand," she said. "Understand what, my love?" I inquired. "There's someone else," she said, shaking her head. "No, there has never been," she said hastily. "I don't understand," I said. "I can't have children," she stated. She was diagnosed with Turner syndrome, which I subsequently found affects around 1 in every 2,000 women born in the United States. This explained her low height, and she said it impacted her ovaries, preventing her from conceiving a kid. Worse lie, she said there is no cure. I could see this disturbed her, but I reassured her that my love for her was not dependent on her capacity to have children. She wept as I hugged her tightly. "But you deserve a complete woman, someone who can give you children," she told me. I took her face in my hands and looked her in the eye. "You are a complete woman. When the time comes, we can adopt. There's lots of kids out there who need a good mother. Hey, look at me. I was adopted and I turned out all right." She grinned. "Seriously, you were adopted?" She questioned. "Yeah. My birth parents were killed in a car accident when I was just 6. My aunt and uncle took me in and adopted me as their own." "You mean you'd let us adopt a child?" said the woman. Maybe 2 children. Who knows? I said. She grinned and placed her arms around my neck. I love you, Ryan Hammond. I love you, too, Sophia. Now, will you marry me? Hell yes, she responded, kissing my face. You'll be the best wife a man could ever want. After a few minutes of fierce tongue wrestling, I looked her in the eye. Just curious, is this why you didn't want to date me before? I said. She glanced at me with tears in her eyes. Yeah. I was afraid you'd hate me if you knew the truth. I could never hate you. The truth is I loved you the moment I first laid eyes on you. Really? Questioned the woman. Really? In fact, I knew then that we would get married. She placed her arms around me and kissed me again. I felt the same thing myself. I was just too scared at the time. By the way, you should also know that I'm still a virgin. That surprised me, since I expected a lady as attractive as her to have men knocking on her door. Excuse me, that should have been Hatch, she added. She was Navy after all. Seriously, I asked. She nodded her head. Yep. I told my parents before they died that I would reserve myself for my spouse, and I did. Why are you concerned because I'm not a virgin? I asked. No, foolish. You only have to vow to be gentle on me on our wedding night. I smiled at her before saying, I promise. The Marine Corps, in its infinite wisdom, decided that because I was medically unfit to serve in combat, I would be given a medical discharge under honorable conditions, which meant I would receive a small stipend. I had lost a few pieces of my abdomen, but the scars had healed, and there was no other damage. Sophia was adamant that we should not sleep together until we were married, which was difficult for me because I longed to make love to her. I accepted because I didn't want to be apart from her even for a day, and we were getting married in January 1971, which was only a few months away. I moved in with her and stayed in the second bedroom, which a former roommate had used. After all, things were tight, and I wasn't making nearly as much as I used to, but Sophia proved to be pretty organized, and she managed to make it work. All she asked for from me was a little contribution to help pay the utilities, which I gladly provided. When I told my parents in Amarillo, Texas, that Sophia and I were getting married, they were overjoyed and promised to come out. Dad suggested that I get a new truck because my old one had a manual transmission, and I told him I couldn't afford the payments, but he wouldn't let me argue. Call it a wedding present. Well, use it to carry all of your belongings out, then fly back, he replied. He also suggested that I contact a local bank where I had a savings account and arrange for some of those funds to be transferred to California. When Linda and I were married, we had an account with the credit union on base, which we closed and divided when we divorced. I opened a new account with a civilian bank in town, using my half of the money, and I still had funds sitting there because that's where my checks were deposited. In the broad scheme of things, it wasn't much, but with the cash I had waiting in Texas, it would surely help get us over the hump. I knew I couldn't remain in Sophia's apartment all day doing nothing and needed anything that paid real money. Sophia, on the other hand, suggested that I use the time to look into local colleges and use my GI Bill to get my degree. Since I didn't have a car, she let me use hers as long as I drove her to work and picked her up. Fortunately, her car was an automatic. After consulting with Sophia, I decided to pursue an engineering degree, which would start about 3 weeks after our wedding. I made the necessary arrangements with the VA. We were married in a modest ceremony at a chapel near Sophia's workplace, and several of her co-workers, as well as my parents, who fell in love with Sophia, came out to wish us well. My father had planned for us to stay at a good hotel in Reno for our honeymoon, so we left right after the wedding. I'd like to say that we went at it like rabbits on our wedding night, but we didn't. That first night, I had no doubt that Sophia was a virgin, which was something new for me, but I certainly didn't complain. I also learned that the key to sex with Sophia was foreplay and oral stimulation, a lot of it, and I was certainly up to the task. It also helped that her doctor had prescribed her hormones. It was slow at first, and I had to learn to be patient, but it was certainly worth it. Once she got warmed up and started lubricating, it was Katie by the door. She surprised me when she attempted to give me a BJ. She had never done it before, and it showed, not that I complained, mind you. What she lacked in experience, she more than made up for in enthusiasm. She promised that she would get better at it, and did she ever? Sophia discovered, much to my delight, that I enjoyed it for several reasons, the first being that my left leg was still a bit weak and couldn't take very much weight for any length of time. We enjoyed our time in Vegas and returned happy and ready to start our new lives together. The first 4 years were not easy, as money was fairly tight, but Sophia was able to make every dollar stretch, and we always made it from month to month. She re-enlisted in late 1971 for 4 more years to give me time to finish college. She also converted the old guest room into an office where I could study in relative peace and quiet. She managed to save enough money to buy an old desk and some bookshelves from a local thrift store, then had them delivered to the apartment and refinished them so they looked like she had spent a small fortune. I still have that desk and those bookcases, and they look as good today as they did when she first got them. Many evenings, as I sat and studied in my office, Sophia would entertain us both by playing her piano or violin. I loved listening to her play and would sometimes pull out my grandfather's old guitar or my Mountain DLR and play along with her. We were never really that good, but we had fun anyway. The musical breaks frequently turned into foreplay, which inevitably turned into romantic interludes in the master bedroom. During those early years, we made sure to save enough money to go out on a date at least twice a month, and it was during one of those outings that I got a glimpse of another side of my wife. I always thought Sophia was the most beautiful woman around, and apparently, I learned, so did a few other men, some of whom worked at the same hospital Sophia did, and one of them happened to be at a club Sophia and I sometimes liked to frequent. With my leg in the shape it was, I wasn't able. One night, this guy came to our table and started chatting up my wife without even saying by your leave to me. Sophia recognized the slight and introduced him to me, letting him know I was her husband. "Good to meet you," he said nervously as he shook my hand. "So you mind if I have a dance with your wife?" I took a sip of my beer when I heard the commotion from the dance floor, and when I looked up, I saw him on the floor, looking up at her, and she stood over him, curious. I could tell Sophia wanted to dance, so I nodded. As they danced, I saw him reach for her several times, but she backed away. I took my cane and approached them. "Don't you ever touch me like that again, asshole!" she yelled. I knew she had a temper, but I had never seen her so angry. "You witch," he growled, "I'll get you for this." I got to them and put the end of my cane on his Adam's apple and pushed him back down, not too gently. "If I were you, I'd stay right where you are, hose. You don't want to piss her off any more than you already have. And you don't want to piss me off. Maybe you'd best put a leash on that lady," he added. Cuck, cuck. What the heck is going on here? I pressed harder on the cane and questioned myself, maybe you'd better keep your paws off my wife. I'd surely have to speak to her. Otherwise, I may have to chop off your balls with a dull butter knife. His face paled, but he said nothing. I turned to Sophia, who was still red-faced. "Are you okay?" I asked her. "I'm okay now," she replied. I nodded. "Maybe we'd better get going," I said. "Let's get out of here," she said in answer. We returned to the table, got our belongings, and walked for the vehicle. "What was it about?" I asked her when we got in the car. "I'm sorry," she said. "He works at the hospital. I dated him a few times before we got together, so I think he believed he had the right to move in on me." "What happened on the dance floor?" she asked. "He placed his hand on my hips, so I kneed him in the balls. That's a move I learnt from an old Master Chief years ago." "Well, that was a nice one." "Kneed him in the balls. What did he mean when he called me a cuck, by the way?" "He is an asshole who believes he is God's gift to women. That's how he addresses every guy who is with a lady he desires. I've never cheated on you and never will. Surely you are aware of this." "Okay, case solved. Good move, by the way." The truth is, I knew she was right. I remember seeing him around the hospital and seeing how he interacted with other women, and I was honestly surprised he hadn't gotten his butt kicked for the way he came on to the married nurses. I also knew Sophia's reputation at the hospital, and she was a straight shooter if there ever was one. "I loved how you handled the cane, placing it on his neck like that." "Would you really have chopped off his balls?" she asked, and I laughed. "You really don't want to know, do you?" It was her turn to chuckle. "Not really, but it's nice to know you're there to protect me. Now please, take me home and make love to me." Yes, Mum, I responded, walking towards the house. In 1974, I graduated with my bachelor's degree, and Sophia was there to cheer me on. I got a job with a local aerospace company and still work there, but I intend to retire very soon. Let me tell you, it felt so good to finally contribute something to our finances. Sophia had always been so supportive of me that I wanted to do something special for her, especially since her birthday was coming up. So, I took the sign-on bonus I received, along with when I showed her the tickets, her eyes widened and she took a leave of absence from work, and off we went. On the flight over, she surprised me when she leaned over and whispered in my ear, "When we get to the hotel, I'm going to blow your mind." True to her word, she wasted no time slipping her dress off when we got to our room, and she looked so gorgeous standing there in front of the window, naked. She guided me to the bed, undressed me, and then gave me a mind-blowing BJ. "I'm just getting started with you, Mr. Hammond," she said in a voice full of promise. We began making love. "Do me," she moaned. "Keep doing me, my husband, don't ever stop." Who was I to argue? "This feels so good," she whispered in my ear. I couldn't remember her being so excited before, and I was determined to savor it for as long as possible. We stayed naked and made love to each other for the majority of the night, except for dinner. She rolled off of me and laid on the bed, and I wondered who she was and what she was doing with my wife. Who cares, I thought, answering my own question. Whatever happened, I was enjoying this little show she was putting on. We flew back home, rested and rejuvenated, but we hated leaving the Bahamas and promised to return someday. We enjoyed the rest of the week and even made love on a secluded beach in broad daylight. Sophia, who had been promoted to petty officer first class by then, decided to join the Naval Reserves when her enlistment ended. She accepted a job at Scripps Memorial Hospital 6 months later, and we decided it was time to buy a house. We found a 2-story, 4-bedroom house that had everything we both wanted, but the stairs were a bit of a challenge for me. We began the process of adopting a child about 6 months later, after making inquiries and speaking with several agencies that introduced us to the process and showed us photos of children waiting for adoption. It was difficult to see these children waiting for someone to take them in, but we instantly fell in love with a set of 10-month-old twins, James and Emily, who were currently in a foster home with several other children. We had to adjust our schedules to accommodate the children, and we didn't want them in daycare, so we looked at our budget and discovered that we could afford a part-time nanny. Sophia was initially nervous, but she quickly adjusted to her new role as mother. I was overjoyed because I had 2 beautiful children and a happy wife. One day, I returned home to find Sophia weeping in our bedroom. "What's wrong, sweetie?" I inquired. "The kids called me Mama." "That's a wonderful thing, isn't it?" I asked. She nodded her head as she cried on my shoulder. "Yes, it is. I simply never imagined I'd hear anybody call me that." Tears streamed down my cheeks as I embraced her, knowing how much this meant to her. I loved listening to the 2 of them play duets on Sophia's piano, which sat prominently in the living room. I took James to Little League and watched him play, and then would go out for pizza or burgers afterward. James decided he wanted to play guitar, so we bought one for him and paid for lessons. Around the same time, he decided I needed to broaden my musical horizons, so he gave me a nice Gibson banjo, knowing how much I enjoyed bluegrass. I started taking lessons and loved playing the thing, and within a year or so, I discovered I could actually play a half-decent tune on it. By then, we had formed an informal family band and frequently jammed together in the living room. You'll never forget the time James and I played dueling banjos together at a neighborhood picnic. By the end, everyone was stomping their feet and clapping as we played. When we finished, James and I gave each other a high five as everyone gave us a standing ovation. What I didn't know was that Sophia had recorded it all on video. In 1986, Sophia was diagnosed with thyroid cancer, which she assured me was a very common and treatable condition, but I was still concerned and wondered if it was related to her Turner syndrome. We had our minor disagreements like any other family, but we always got through them. Sophia survived, but she now had to take thyroid medication every day. Years later, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and Sophia, along with several others in her reserve unit, were called into active duty and assigned to the USNS Mercy, a hospital ship based in San Diego. By then, she had just been promoted to senior chief petty officer. Having served in combat, I was naturally concerned for her well-being, and of course, the children were scared as well. But she put our minds at ease, telling us that hers was not a combat role and that we exchanged letters at least 3 times a week, and she called us from the ship about twice a month to let us know she was okay. The holiday season was the worst part of the whole ordeal, but we got through it. She called on Easter and Christmas, and the kids and I even played a Christmas song for her while she listened. In the middle of March 1991, we received word that the ship would be leaving the area of operations and returning to San Diego in April. When the time came, the kids and I drove to San Diego to pick her up. We smothered her with hugs and kisses when she got off the ship, and I could tell she was happy to be back home. I don't know if the kids noticed, but I saw something different about her. Having been through combat, I thought more after examining her. The doctor recommended she see a cardiologist, and it only took him 30 seconds of listening to her heart through a stethoscope to tell us she needed surgery right away. It turned out that what other doctors had simply written off as a heart murmur over the years was much worse. The valve on her aorta wasn't working and needed to be replaced. They ended up giving her a mech. After a few months, she began to experience menopausal symptoms, which we both knew were most likely caused by Turner syndrome. Her joints ached all the time, and she had a lot of wild mood swings. She could be happy and carefree one moment, then cry for no reason at all the next, and then be angry at the world for essentially nothing. Her libido and our sex life both disappeared. Her doctor did in 1994. The children graduated from high school, and James was accepted to the Naval Academy at Annapolis, while Emily was accepted to UCLA and hoped to one day become a doctor. Sophia and I cried as they moved on with their lives, and then our lives as empty nesters began. We considered selling the house and moving into something smaller, but we dismissed that idea due to the rising cost of housing. A few years later, Sophia discovered she had enough points to retire from the Navy Reserves, so she did. She remained at Scripps and lost herself in her job. One night, Sophia went to me and spoke the words that no married man ever wants to hear: "We need to talk." "What's the matter?" I asked. "Before you say anything, I want you to please hear me out completely," she said me. "Okay," I answered, feeling worried. Was she going to ask for a divorce? I had no clue what was going through her mind. "Promise me you won't get mad or anything," she said me. I was genuinely becoming irritated by now, but I kept my cool. "Just speak to me, Sophia," I urged. "What's going on?" "I know the previous few years have been terrible," she added. "It's been difficult for both of us, and I know it's been a long time since we've been able to do anything. You understand it." "I am in bed." "I don't blame you, not at all," my response was. "It's me, it's all my fault." "No, it's not your fault that you had to undergo surgery," I told her. "But I can't satisfy you anymore," she said with tears. "And it's not right for you to have to go without sex because I can't do it anymore." "What are your suggestions?" I asked. "Maybe you should find another woman and have sex with her," she told you. "What? Do you want a divorce or something?" I inquired, surprised that she would even propose such a thing, particularly after what I had gone through with Linda. "Oh, heavens, no," she responded, "I love you so much. I simply want you to be happy, and if that means having sex with another lady, I'm willing to let you do it." "Do you want me to cheat on you?" I inquired, still startled. She shook her head. "No, I don't. It wouldn't be considered cheating anyhow." "Not really. You would have my consent, and you would not be sneaking around on me. Besides, it's just sex." It was my time to shake my head. "No, sweetie, I am not going to do it, with or without your consent. I made a commitment to you in front of God and witnesses to love, honor, and cherish you in good and bad times, illness and health. On top of that, I swore to abandon all others till death do us part. I'm not breaking those vows." "But I can't please you anymore," she sobbed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It's unfair. You deserve to be happy." "But I am happy," you said. "Every minute I get to spend with you makes me happy." "How can you be pleased with me?" she asked, crying. "I can't make you happy anymore. I am a failure. I am scarred and nasty. I'm not sure how you can endure to look at me." "You're not a failure, and you're certainly not ugly," I told her as she sobbed on my shoulder. I was aware that her surgery had made her feel less beautiful, but I never brought it up. "You're the most gorgeous lady I've ever met, and I'd be delighted to compare scars with you." I never want to hear you say it again. You've made me the happiest guy in the world and raised 2 great children while working and serving your nation. You are the finest wife and mother a guy could ever dream for. Don't ever tell me you're a failure, you aren't. Believe me, I know many of ladies that couldn't compare to you. I apologize. I just want you to be happy, she said. You deserve that, and you make me happy, I responded. Listen, let's schedule an appointment with the doctor and see what we can do, okay? I don't want to see another doctor and am tired of taking pills, she told me. I understand, but it wouldn't hurt to find out. Please contact the doctor tomorrow and arrange an appointment. She nodded. Okay, I will. She contacted the following day and scheduled an appointment for later that week. I took a comp day off and went with her. The doctor and I both listened as she told what was going on. He took notes and waited for her to complete before consulting her records. I notice you were taking hormones before your hysterectomy. Are you still taking them? Sophia shook her head. They took me off of them and said I wouldn't need them anymore, she said. The doctor nodded. I see. It's also been a while since we examined your thyroid. Let's start with some blood tests to determine what we're dealing with. Given your background, I'd want to check your glucose level. My office will contact you within a day or 2, and we will proceed from there. Okay, Sophia replied. After the doctor left, a nurse came into the room and took a few vials of blood. We left and went home after stopping for a quick bite to eat. A couple of days later, the doctor's office called. Some of her levels were off, including her thyroid, so the doctor called in a new prescription. He also discovered her glucose levels were elevated and determined that she was diabetic, but not so bad that she needed medication. His plan was to see if it could be managed through diet. That didn't surprise me because I had started researching Turner syndrome on the internet, and a number of sites suggested that diabetes was fairly common among women with the condition. I also took note of the symptoms listed, and I discovered that Sophia had displayed a number of them over the years. The doctor also prescribed a new hormone therapy and scheduled a follow-up appointment with his dietitian in 30 days. Sophia's mood improved significantly, and she was almost back to her old self. I picked up her new medications and scheduled another day off to accompany her to the dietitian. I planned to go on the diet with her, partly to support her, but also to avoid diabetes myself. It took a few days for us to see results from her new regimen, but it was well worth it. Sophia approached me in the bedroom around a week after the new diet and medications, wearing nothing but a grin, which I had not seen in a long time. Do you want to play? She inquired, assuming a sensual posture. I held her in my arms and kissed her. Always, I said. I began to undress, but she stopped me. Let me take care of that, she said, as she began unbuttoning my shirt. Then she took off my belt and unzipped my pants. I didn't want to harm her, and this was the most we had done in a long time. She leaned over me as she gently began having sex with me and looked me in the eyes. This feels so damn amazing. I have missed this so much. Me too, I answered. You're very attractive. Never stop doing this. I won't, the woman said. In fact, I may just chain you to the bed and keep you just like this, naked, for the rest of my life. Works for me, I said, chuckling. After a few more minutes, I burst within her, and her climax came at the same moment. I felt like I could go on for much longer and began moving under her, but I saw her face grimace somewhat. I'm sorry, babe, but I'm starting to get a bit sore, she remarked, sliding off of me. That's fine, I whispered, hugging her close to me. There's no need to apologize. I'm so glad you didn't take me up on my stupid offer, I told you. So am I, she told me. You have my permission to kick my butt if I ever mention that again. I may just take you up on that, I responded, smiling. I love you so much, she said me before kissing me deeply. I love you more, I answered in reply. After we kissed, it was great to have Sophia back. Our sex life had improved significantly. We weren't as active as we had been when we first married, but it was still quite pleasurable. In 1997, Emily received her bachelor's degree and prepared for the next stage in her education. The 3 of us went to Annapolis to see James graduate from the Naval Academy as a newly commissioned ensign. After the ceremony, he introduced us to a number of his classmates, many of whom thanked Sophia and me for our service. We accepted their gratitude and congratulated them on their accomplishments. After that, I asked James what he was going to do. "I'm going for jets," he said. "Are you going to be a pilot?" I asked him. "I'm going to be a naval aviator," he informed me proudly. After we celebrated our children's graduations, we returned home, and Emily remained with us for the summer until she needed to return to school. She still had 4 years of medical school and a residency to finish her degree. In 2005, doctors discovered an aneurysm on Sophia's aorta, so she went through yet another heart surgery to replace it. During the surgery, the doctor discovered that he would have to replace her mechanical valve, so he put in a pig valve, which he said would last her the rest of her life. I recall reading that her Turner syndrome, which, based on what I saw, could reduce her life by. Emily finished her residency and decided to join James, who had just been promoted to commander and was in charge of a fighter squadron assigned to an aircraft carrier. At the time, I wasn't too concerned about sex or lack thereof, just having her in my arms was enough. She retired from Scripps and spent a few quiet years at home, and both of her children had married. She was previously married, but when she discovered her husband cheating on her with a nurse, she gave him a well-deserved kick in the testicles. After her divorce, she started dating another doctor, but their relationship was not serious. Sophia had been having difficulty breathing or swallowing her food for some time, and it had gotten to the point where the only way she could sleep was with her head elevated. One night in November 2019, she woke me up frantic, and I could tell she was having a hard time breathing. I tried to calm her down, but nothing worked, and I could tell she was truly suffering, so I called 911. The ambulance arrived quickly, and they took her to the emergency. After what seemed like an eternity, a doctor came out and informed me that they had found a mass in the back of her throat that was preventing her from breathing properly. They took a sample of the mass to determine what it was and had her on a machine that would allow her to breathe. I asked if I could see her, but they said she was sedated at the moment, so I waited and waited and waited some more. I drank 1 cup of bad coffee after another. As I sat waiting for some, eventually, the doctor came out and pulled me into a small conference room where we could speak in private. He informed me that the mass appeared to be cancerous and that they were preparing her for emergency surgery to remove the mass so she could breathe. He also informed me that they were still analyzing it to determine whether or not the tumor was malignant, so he suggested I go home and give the nurse my cell number. When I got home, I called into work to let them know what was going on, and my supervisor told me to take whatever time I needed. I collapsed on the couch and slept fitfully until the chime on my phone woke me several hours later. When I arrived at the hospital, I was taken to the recovery area and asked to wait until they had her room prepared. While I was waiting, a doctor came out and told me that they had confirmed the cancer, though it was a fairly aggressive cancer. My heart fell when I saw her in that hospital bed. She looked weary and tired, but she put on a brave front. I took her hand in mine and kissed her cheek. "Has the doctor spoken to you yet?" I inquired, and she nodded. "Will you be okay?" I asked. "Yeah," she answered softly. "I'm just worried about you." "You'll be all right, darling. I'm right here. I am not going anywhere." We sat there holding hands until she finally drifted off to sleep. I kissed her on the forehead and went home after the doctor said they were going to keep her for a few days to get her set up for chemo. My supervisor understood the situation and told me to take whatever time I needed. I had a lot of vacation, sick, and comp time saved up, so I took it and made the necessary changes in the house so she wouldn't have to navigate the stairs in her weakened state. Fortunately, the kids came out for the holidays and Jennifer, James' wife, cooked the meals with Emily's help. By this time, James was a captain in the Navy, commanding a carrier group, and he took enough leave to spend Easter and Christmas with us. Sophia and I spent as much time as we could with the grandchildren. When the doctors discovered Sophia's infections shortly after Christmas, they immediately halted her chemotherapy until they had decided on a course of action, and the rest is history. The children were a true blessing, assisting me with the funeral and Sophia's final arrangements, and we all cried on each other's shoulders during this difficult time. I went into the bedroom and looked at the large oak chest that ran the width of our bed, which I had made for Sophia 43 years ago when we first moved into the house. By then, almost everything else had either been given away or donated to Goodwill. When I opened the chest, a part of me felt like I was invading her privacy. I looked inside, wondering what I would find. There was an envelope on top, addressed to me. I set that aside for a moment and went through what she had placed in the chest. I found several notebooks and opened them. Sophia had kept every picture her children and grandchildren had ever drawn. I also discovered a stack of videos she had made of the family, including a tape of the barbecue where James and I played dueling banjos. I decided to make copies of them for the kids. I opened the letter and pulled out a handwritten note, which I could tell was fairly recent because her handwriting wasn't as neat as it once was. My beloved Ryan, it started, I'm not sure whether he'll survive this procedure, so I needed to get this off my chest while I still could. Over the previous 48 years, you have made me the happiest woman on the planet, and I can only hope and pray that I have made you happy as well. Please, do not weep for me. I have made peace with God and am ready to face my Creator with a clean conscience. In the 48 years we've been together, you're the only guy I've ever been with, and I know you've been loyal as well. I also understand that you still have needs, so please find someone to make you happy in your old age. Just pledge to remember me from time to time, okay? You'll be in paradise, waiting for the day when we may be reunited forever. Your devoted wife, Sophia. The tears streamed down my cheeks as I read the note 3 times, knowing it was the last one I'd ever read from her. I reinserted the note into the envelope and placed it in the chest with her memories, closing it and vowing to keep it closed and locked from now on. I looked up at the ceiling, wondering if she could see me. I love you, Sophia, I spoke quietly into the room. And I always will. You were the greatest wife ever, and no one could ever replace you. Thank you for watching Sophia and Ryan's wonderful tale. What do you think is the most significant lesson from their journey? Please let us know in the comments and remember to like and subscribe for more.